house did not feel wrong at first. That is the part that bothers me most when I look back on it. There was no instinct that fired. No moment at the front door where I hesitated and thought maybe we should keep looking. It felt like a house. 4 walls, a roof, a yard, a price we could afford. We signed the papers and handed over everything we had, saved for 6 years, and moved our entire lives into it without a second thought. Within 3 weeks, I was sleeping with a knife on my nightstand. My wife Diane and I bought the house in a suburb outside of Memphis, Tennessee in the fall of 2022. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a detached garage, a backyard with a wood privacy fence running the perimeter. The neighborhood was quiet, working class, established, the kind of street where people have lived in the same house for 20 years and know each other by first name. Our neighbors on the left, an older couple named the Farleys, brought us a pie the day we moved in. It felt like exactly the kind of place we had been trying to get to. The first night we slept there, I woke up at 4 a.m. and smelled cigarette smoke. Not faint, not the ghost of old smoke baked into the walls which I had read about with older houses. Strong and fresh, the kind of smell that means a cigarette is burning nearby right now. I lay still and breathed it in and tried to locate where it was coming from. It seemed to be drifting in from somewhere rather than rising from the walls. I got up and walked through the house quietly. Diane stayed asleep. I checked every room, every window. Everything was closed. The smell was strongest in the hallway outside the second bedroom, the one we were using for storage while we got settled. I opened that door and the smell hit me full in the face. I stood in the doorway and looked at the dark room. Boxes stacked against the wall, a spare mattress leaning in the corner, nothing else. I turned the light on, empty, window closed and latched. I stood there long enough to feel certain the room was empty, and then I went back to bed and told myself the previous owner must have smoked heavily in that room for years, and the smell was working its way out of the walls. I believed that for exactly 4 more days. On the 5th day, Diane mentioned it at breakfast without me bringing it up first. She said she had been waking up at night and smelling smoke. She asked if I thought the wiring might be faulty, if something electrical might be burning somewhere in the walls. I said I would have an electrician come take a look. I did not tell her about my own experience because I did not want to worry her. I called an electrician that afternoon. He came 2 days later and checked the entire house and found nothing wrong. The smell kept coming, always at night, always strongest near that second bedroom, always gone by morning, as completely as if it had never been there. 2 weeks in, I started paying closer attention to the details of that room during the day. Something about it had begun to bother me in a way I could not name. I would walk past the closed door during the day and feel a vague unease that I kept brushing aside. One afternoon I went in and stood in the center of the room and just looked at it carefully for the first time. The room was a rectangle, 3 walls with the door on one end and the window on the other. Closet on the right wall, standard sliding door. I had opened it when we first moved in and put a few boxes inside. I looked at the left wall. It was not quite right. I had not noticed it before because the boxes stacked against it had drawn my eye away. But standing in the center of the room and looking straight at it, the left wall was slightly closer than it should have been. The room felt narrower on the left side than the right side, in a way that was subtle enough to miss on a casual look, but obvious once you saw it. I measured it. The room was 14 feet wide on the right side from the door frame to the right wall. It was 11 feet 3 inches wide on the left side from the door frame to the left wall. 2 feet 9 inches of space that was not accounted for anywhere in the house. I went into the hallway and looked at the wall that ran alongside the second bedroom. It was a plain wall, nothing on it. I knocked on it with my knuckles in several places and listened to the sound it made. Solid near the door, solid in the middle, hollow at the far end near the window. I went back into the bedroom and knocked on the left wall from the inside, solid along most of it, hollow at the far end, matching exactly what I had heard from the hallway. There was a space behind that wall, a narrow space running the length of the room on the left side, accessible from somewhere I had not found yet. I want to tell you that I handled what came next calmly and rationally. I did not. I went downstairs and sat at the kitchen table, and did not move for a long time. Diane was out running errands. I sat alone in that house, and thought about the smoke coming from that room every night, and the hollow space behind the wall, and I felt the particular cold that comes when several small things you have been explaining away individually suddenly refuse to be explained away together. I called a contractor I knew from work and asked him to come over that evening. He owed me a favor and he came without asking too many questions. I showed him the measurements and the hollow sound in the wall. He went over it carefully, and then went outside and walked along the exterior of the house. He came back in and told me there was a narrow ventilation gap along the exterior of the house on that side that was significantly wider than standard construction required. He said it looked like the exterior had been modified at some point. He said there was also a section of exterior siding near the foundation on that side that had newer screws than the surrounding panels. Newer by many years. He asked me how long I had owned the house. I said 3 weeks. He told me I needed to call someone before he started opening any walls. He meant the police. He said it in a way that told me he had already worked out the same thing I had worked out. I called Diane first and told her to stay at her sister's house that night, without explaining why in a way that would frighten her. Then I called the Memphis police non-emergency line and explained what I had found. The officer I spoke to initially was not particularly concerned. A hollow wall in an old house is not a crime, but he said he would send a unit to take a look. 2 officers arrived an hour later. I showed them everything. The measurements, the hollow wall, the exterior siding. One of them made a call and 20 minutes later, 2 more officers arrived along with a supervisor. They opened the wall from the exterior side. I was not in the room when they did it. I was in the kitchen, and I heard them working, and then I heard one of them say something to another in a low voice, and then it went quiet in a way that felt significant. The supervisor came and found me in the kitchen and told me to stay where I was. What they found in that space, I'm going to describe as plainly as I can, because I still have difficulty saying it. The space behind the wall was approximately 2.5 feet wide and ran 14 feet along the length of the bedroom. At the far end, nearest the window, the space widened slightly into a small area roughly the size of a large closet. In that area, there was a folding chair, a battery-powered camping lantern, an ashtray with cigarette butts in it, several of which the officers noted appeared recent, a small cooler, and on the narrow ledge that ran along the interior at eye level, positioned at a point that the officers confirmed corresponded exactly with a nearly invisible pinhole in the bedroom wall, a clear line of sight directly into the room. Someone had been in that space while we slept in the house. Not just the 3 weeks we had lived there. The cigarette butts at the bottom of the ashtray were old, compressed, the kind of accumulation that takes months. The cooler had ring stains inside from containers that had been placed and replaced many times. The folding chair legs had worn small indentations into the wooden floor of the space from long repeated use. This had been going on for a very long time before we ever signed our names on that house. The investigation lasted several months. Detectives worked with the title company and tracked the history of the property through the previous owner, who had purchased it in 2008 and sold it to us in 2022. The previous owner, a man who had lived alone, told investigators he had no knowledge of the space. Detectives did not fully believe him but could not prove otherwise. They identified a person who had been seen in the neighborhood regularly and matched partial forensic evidence found in the space. I was told this much and nothing more. The case was handed to a specialized unit. I do not know what ultimately happened with it. We were out of that house within a month of what they found in the wall. We broke the lease agreement we had on our storage unit, put everything in Diane's sister's garage, and moved into an apartment across town. The house sat on the market for 4 months before someone bought it. I do not know if the new owners were told everything. I hope they were. Diane does not sleep well. She has not since I finally told her the full details of what they found, which I waited 3 weeks to do, because I needed to find the right way to say it, and I'm still not sure I did. The thing I can't get out of my head is the ashtray. The layers of old ash at the bottom, and the newer butts on top. The way it told a story without any words. Someone had been sitting in that space in the dark for a very long time, completely comfortable, completely patient, watching us sleep through a hole in the wall, the size of a fingertip. And before us, watching whoever lived there before. There are moments in life where everything splits into a before and an after, where you can point to a specific second and say, that is where things changed permanently. For my husband Trevor and me, we had moved into the house in Austin, Texas, 3 months before our son Noah was born. We wanted to be settled before he arrived. New neighborhood, new city. Trevor had just accepted a job transfer, and we had 4 months to find a place and get everything ready. We found a 3-bedroom house in a quiet residential street in the north part of the city. Good-sized yard, 1 story, safe neighborhood with young families on every block. It felt like exactly the right place to bring a baby home to. Noah came home in February. Those first weeks were what everyone tells you they will be. Exhausting and overwhelming, and the most complete thing either of us had ever felt. We had a baby monitor with a camera set up in his room. The kind with a small screen you keep on the nightstand so you can watch him without going in and disturbing his sleep. I watched that screen constantly, the way all new mothers do. I knew every corner of that room from the monitor view. The crib against the left wall, the dresser straight ahead, the window on the right with the blackout curtain, the closet door to the left of the dresser, always kept closed. I knew exactly what that room looked like at night on that screen, which is why I knew immediately when something was different. Noah had been sleeping through most of the night for about 3 weeks by April. I was still waking up to check the monitor out of habit. On that Tuesday night, I woke up just before 2 a.m. and reached for the monitor the way I always did. Noah was asleep in his crib, still and peaceful the way he slept. In the corner of the room between the closet door and the dresser, where there was nothing but wall, there was a shape, dark, roughly the height of a child, maybe 3.5 to 4 feet tall, standing completely still with its back pressed into the corner. The monitor was in night vision mode, which gave everything a green-tinted gray quality, and the shape was darker than everything around it. Not a shadow. Shadows do not have edges that defined. This had a form, a definite standing, unmoving form, pressed into the corner of my infant son's room. I did not move for what felt like a very long time. I watched the screen, and the shape did not move, and Noah slept in his crib 6 feet away from it, and I lay in my bed, unable to make my body do anything at all, for what I later estimated was almost 2 full minutes. Then, something broke loose in me, and I was out of that bed and down the hallway and through Noah's door before I had consciously decided to move. The room was empty. Noah asleep. Corner empty. Closet door closed exactly as I had left it. Window locked. Nothing under the crib. Nothing behind the dresser. I stood in that room and held my son and checked every inch of it, and there was nothing there. Trevor was in the doorway. I had woken him coming down the hall. I showed him the monitor, scrolling back through the recorded footage the camera stored automatically. We watched it together sitting on the floor of Noah's room, with Noah in my arms. The footage showed the room at 1:58 a.m., empty and still. At 2:01 a.m. the shape was there, present in the corner with no transition, no movement leading up to it, simply not there and then there. We watched it stand in the corner for 4 minutes and 17 seconds without moving. At 2:05 a.m., it was gone. Same as the arrival. No movement away, simply there and then not there. Trevor watched the footage 3 times. He did not say it was a camera glitch. He did not say it was a trick of the night vision. He is not that kind of person, and what we were looking at did not look like either of those things. He put Noah back in the crib, took my hand, and we went and sat in the kitchen until morning. We called a home security company the next day and had cameras installed throughout the house, interior and exterior. We told them it was a general security concern and did not describe what we had seen. We also, and I recognize how this sounds, contacted a woman that Trevor's coworker had recommended, someone who described herself as sensitive to residual energy in spaces. I am a middle school math teacher. Contacting someone like that was not something the version of me from a year earlier would have done. I contacted her anyway. She came on a Thursday afternoon while Noah was napping. She walked through the house slowly and said very little for the first 20 minutes. When she reached Noah's room, she stopped in the doorway and did not go in. She stood there for almost a full minute. Then she told us that whatever she was picking up in that room felt young. She said the word tethered, which I have thought about many times since. She said she did not believe it was threatening, but that it was present, and that it was drawn to Noah specifically in the way that certain energies are drawn to very young children. She recommended we research the history of the property. We did. Trevor spent 2 weekends going through county records and old newspaper archives. What he found was not dramatic. There was no famous tragedy, no documented horror attached to the address. But in a digitized local newspaper from 1961, he found a brief article. A family had lived at our address in the late 1950s. In 1959, their son, age 6, had died of a sudden illness at home. The article was 4 sentences long and gave no further detail. A 6-year-old boy, at our address, in 1959. I do not know what to do with that information. I am not someone who knows how to process it. Trevor has his own thoughts about it that he keeps mostly to himself. What I know is what I saw on that monitor screen. The height of the shape. The way it stood in the corner of a room where a baby was sleeping, still and patient and present. The shape appeared 2 more times over the following 6 weeks, always between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., always in the same corner, always gone before I could get down the hallway. The new security cameras captured it the same way the baby monitor had. A form in the corner, present and then not present with no transition either way. After the 3rd appearance, we contacted a priest from a church 2 miles from our house. He came and walked through the property and said prayers in every room. He spent the most time in Noah's room. He did not tell us what he believed was happening. He told us he would pray for the house and for our family, and he left us his number and told us to call if anything further occurred. Nothing occurred after that. The corner stayed empty. The monitor showed only Noah sleeping. The security footage showed only the ordinary dark of a quiet house at night. Whether that was a result of the priest's visit, or simply the end of whatever had been happening on its own, I cannot tell you. I am honestly not sure which possibility comforts me more. Noah is 2 years old now. He has started talking, the way toddlers do, single words and short phrases, and the occasional thing that stops you cold because it is too specific for a 2-year-old to have produced on his own. Last month he pointed at the corner of his room in the middle of the afternoon and said, clearly and without any context, the word, friend. Then he went back to playing with his blocks like he had said nothing at all. Trevor and I looked at each other across the room. We did not say anything. There was nothing to say that would have made either of us feel better about it. We leave the hall light on every night now. Noah's door stays open. I still check the monitor every time I wake up. The corner is always empty. I have never told this story to anyone outside of my immediate family, not because I am embarrassed by it, because every time I have tried to say it out loud, the person listening gets a look on their face that tells me they are deciding whether or not to believe me. This was October of 2022. My husband Patrick had flown to Chicago for a work conference, 4 days, coming back Friday evening. We had just moved into our house in a neighborhood outside of Charlotte, North Carolina 6 weeks earlier. Still getting used to it, still learning the sounds and the layout and the way the light moved through the rooms at different times of day. Still at that stage where everything feels slightly unfamiliar, even though it is supposed to be home. I was alone for the first time in the new house. The first 2 nights were fine. Quiet neighborhood, good locks. I kept the television on later than usual for the company of background noise, and went to bed without any issue. I spoke to Patrick both evenings. Everything was normal. The 3rd night was a Wednesday. I had gone to bed around 11. I was almost asleep when I heard something outside the bedroom window. Not loud, a soft sound, deliberate, like something brushing slowly against the exterior siding of the house directly outside the window. Once, then again, slow and dragging. I lay still and listened. It stopped. I waited another full minute and heard nothing. I told myself it was a branch. We had a large oak tree in the side yard and some of its lower branches reached close to the house. Wind in the branches, completely normal. I closed my eyes. It came again, slower this time, longer, the sound of something dragging itself along the side of the house from the direction of the backyard toward the front, moving with a patience that branches in the wind do not have. I sat up in bed. The bedroom window was to my left. We had not yet put up proper curtains, just a temporary white liner that let in light during the day, and at night showed the faint dark outline of whatever was outside. It was not a thick curtain. It was thin enough that a shape on the other side would be visible if that shape was close to the glass. I looked at the curtain. There was a shape, pressed against the outside of the window, a hand, flat against the glass, with the fingers spread, visible through the thin curtain liner as a dark outline, completely still, pressed against my bedroom window from outside at 11:30 at night while I lay alone in a house I had lived in for 6 weeks. I did not scream. I sat in that bed and stared at the outline of that hand against the curtain, and I felt something I had never felt before in my life, a total and complete stillness that was not calm, the opposite of calm, the kind of stillness that happens when your body cannot decide between fight and run, and so it does neither and just locks. The hand did not move. I reached for my phone on the nightstand with the slowest movement I have ever made in my life. I did not take my eyes off the curtain. I found the phone by feel and brought it under the covers and dialed 911 without looking at the screen. I whispered to the dispatcher. I told her my address and told her there was someone outside my bedroom window. She told me to stay calm and stay on the line and that she was sending officers immediately. She asked me if the doors were locked. I said yes. She asked if I could get to an interior room without passing the window. I said the bathroom was directly across the hall. She told me to go. I moved off the far side of the bed, away from the window, keeping low. I did not look at the curtain again. I crossed the hallway and locked the bathroom door and sat on the floor with my back against the bathtub and stayed on the line with the dispatcher and listened to the house. For a long time there was nothing. Then I heard footsteps on the porch, heavy and slow, moving across the front of the house. Then the sound of the front door handle, someone trying it. Once, then twice, then silence. Then a knock. 3 knocks on my front door, slow and spaced, at midnight, while I sat on my bathroom floor alone. I told the dispatcher what I was hearing. She told me officers were 2 minutes out and to stay where I was and stay quiet. I pressed myself against the bathtub and did not make a sound. The knocking stopped. A minute later I heard the sirens. They cut off quickly, the way they do when officers are close, and do not want to announce themselves further. I heard car doors, voices outside. The dispatcher told me officers were on the property, and that I should stay in the bathroom until they knocked and identified themselves. They knocked 3 minutes later. I heard them clearly identify themselves as Charlotte PD through the front door. I came out of the bathroom and let them in. 4 officers searched the property completely. Front yard, backyard, side yard, the oak tree, the fence line, the street in both directions. They found no one. But they found something along the side of the house outside the bedroom window. In the narrow dirt bed that ran between the siding and the fence, there were shoe prints, deep ones, pressed into the soft soil close to the foundation. And along the siding itself, at window height, faint smear marks in the dirt on the exterior surface, several of them, the kind of marks left by a hand pressed flat against a surface and dragged slowly along it. One of the officers, a woman who had been doing this a long time, based on the way she carried herself, looked at those smear marks for a moment and then looked at me and said they would file a full report and requested that I call someone to stay with me for the rest of the night. She said it in the tone of someone who is not suggesting, but telling. I called my neighbor 2 doors down, a woman named Carol who I had met briefly when we first moved in. I called her at midnight and told her what had happened, and she was at my door in 4 minutes, with a jacket over her pajamas and no questions asked. She stayed until morning. Patrick came home a day early. He drove through the night from the airport after I called him, and arrived at 6 a.m. and walked the entire perimeter of the property himself in the daylight. He found one more thing the officers had missed in the dark. At the back fence, in the far corner of the yard, a section of the wooden fence panel had been loosened. Not broken, carefully loosened, the screws partially backed out on one side so the panel could be pushed inward and then reset to look normal from the outside. Someone had made themselves a way in and out of our yard that was invisible, unless you were specifically looking for it. Patrick fixed the fence that same morning. We had a security system installed that afternoon, cameras on every corner of the property, motion sensors, the works. We also finally put up proper curtains in the bedroom, thick ones, the kind where nothing outside can see in and nothing outside is visible from within. I have not looked at that bedroom window after dark without the curtains fully closed since that night. Not once, not even to check if something is there.